So, what's your name and what's your story?
Richard White. And I was a resident of Honolulu from 36 through 47. So on December 7th, I was in bed reading the Sunday newspaper, and I heard an anti-aircraft shell come over and land up the hill from my home. I went out on the porch and looked, and I could see the dust and debris coming up from the flower bed alongside a house, what we call Pacific Heights. So I went in, got on the telephone to call the police department, and their big switchboard, of course, is already lit up and busy. So then I called the Coast Guard in the federal building downtown Honolulu, and a yeoman who had been sleeping there all night answered the phone, and he didn't know what was going on. So I went back on the porch, and the people, and then I made another telephone call. I called Fort Armstrong, which is at the entrance to Honolulu Harbor. And they had an engineering outfit and the anti-aircraft. So their phone number was in the book at that time. I called and the soldier answered the phone. And I said, "What are you doing having target practice down there? If you are, you're firing in the wrong direction." And he replied, "Buddy, this is the real McCoy." And he hung up. I went out on the porch, and the street was full of people by then, and also heard the explosion. And I told him, said, "We're under attack by the Japanese." Right as I got the words out of my mouth, a squadron of Japanese fighter planes had been over strafing the other side of the island at Waimanalo and Kaneohe Naval Air Station, flew right over our heads. And there they were with those big red dots under their wings. So we were convinced. And then we got our radios on. Nobody had a radio on at 7:30 in the morning. And we were told to black out, run all the water we could in different receptacles, keep our cars off the street, and black out any windows that we could black out. So that was the beginning of the war in Honolulu. And from then on, we had blackout, and we had martial law from that point forward until the war ended. And the Army was in charge of the islands, and they were in charge of seeing that there was enough food coming in and it was properly distributed and so forth. So that was...
How old were you at the time?
41, 26, or 25, yeah.
And were you in the military at the
No,
time?
I was a civilian. I went over there in 1936 and was working for a freight forwarding company. I had a wife and a 6-month-old daughter who's now 72 years old.
And did you know people who were hurt in the bombing run by the Japanese?
No, there were a few people hurt in different places around the island, but they did very little strafing of civilians. I heard a story about one Army officer who was out deep sea fishing on the other side of the island, on the north side, and probably to limber up their guns, one plane came down and fired on this little fishing boat, and he got hit in the rump with a bullet. And all during the rest of the war, he tried to get a Purple Heart out of that, but he wasn't able to. He wasn't in combat. That was one of the amusing stories. There weren't very many, actually. But
so could you believe it was the Japanese attacking when it first happened?
No, nobody had an inkling. And especially the people in the Japanese population.
See you later.
Of course, the people in their consulate knew all about it. They were busy in the back of the consulate burning papers that morning. But it was a great surprise. And,
Were you angry?
You know, we're angry and surprised, yeah.
And
They did a lot of damage. God, we went out by Pearl Harbor on Monday and saw the ships that had been hit. One turned turtle in Oklahoma. Eventually they righted it. But yeah, we saw a lot of the damage. They strafed the airport buildings, and but there were very few civilian casualties. But they managed to ruin most of the barracks. Anybody who was out in the open was fair game.
as a separate question, can I ask you what lessons you've learned in life?
Well, I've learned to be moderate in everything.
Why?
Well, to preserve your good health mainly, and everything in moderation. No smoking, limit on alcohol, have a positive thought, and of course longevity has a lot to do with our genes. And I am very fortunate to have good genes as far as that goes. I'm 98.
Are you really?
And feeling very well.
What year were you born in?
March 1916.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm still here. It's my wife Barbara. We were both widowed and old friends, so here we are together,
Well, very nice.
making the best of life.
Any advice you have for young people how to get ahead in life or lead a good life?
Well, just have a positive outlook, do the best you can, be honest, and look forward to the future.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.